We are available on Spotify and YouTube, so don't forget to subscribe for our latest episode.
This podcast is lit.
If you have low test scores, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but my class ain't one.
99 problems, but my class ain't one. If your test scores are low, I feel bad for you, son. I got 99 problems, but my class ain't one.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the This Podcast is Lit podcast. Joining us today is Mr. Technology himself, the Maverick, Mr. Ackroyd. Hello, sir.
Hiya, you all right?
You want to explain to the audience why I'm calling you Mr. Technology?
I don't know, really. I don't think I really did anything. I just showed the video. That was it.
Modest he's being.
That is so modest. That is so modest. Miss Ray, how are you doing? All right?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just enjoying Mr. Ackroyd's moment in the sun after working next door to him for about 7 years, Mr. Ackroyd. I'm hearing lots of conversations start with Katie. I've just got one quick question. I'm quite loving this. I feel like I've been made redundant.
Absolutely. Well, for those of you on the live lesson earlier today, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. When Mr. Ackroyd was changing his PowerPoint slide, a little camera noise went off.
How
perfect is that?
13 weeks in lockdown, and this is what brings us joy.
I mean, it's very far removed from what the sort of conversations, as Miss Ray was saying, in March. If we had known that Mr. Ackroyd was in June going to be having those sorts of noises going on in a live lesson.
I had to pull an all-nighter just to do it, though.
And speaking of all-nighters, how's it going, DJ Zoom?
Pretty good, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. All right, guys. Well, this week we are analysing and discussing and talking about a poem called War Photographer. I think it's probably one of our more favourite poems in the cluster. Is that fair to say, guys?
Yeah, I think so. I think Duffy's always a bit of a stalwart at GCSE and A-level, and she's someone that, both at GCSE and A-level, that students that I teach tend to really engage with. She's got a really strong voice in her poems, and I think they really like that.
Yeah, I enjoy teaching it, and students seem to enjoy analysing it because the imagery is so vivid in it. They really come bring it to the table. I really like.
Absolutely, and it's a poem that's been around for a while. I remember studying it at school myself when I was a wee lad. So it's certainly been around in the canon for a while. But I think it's around because it's so good. I mean, I was thinking a little bit earlier today when I saw Mr. Ackroyd's live lesson that it's become a tiny bit outdated. I think the first verse in this red room maybe feels a little bit like it's difficult to explain to students what a red room is. It's not really something that we use nowadays. It feels like it forms a key part of the imagery early on. But apart from that, I think it is a very good poem, and I do enjoy it too. Right, and let's kick off then with our poem in a headline. Let's be a maverick this week, shall we? I'll start.
Age before beauty.
Okay, so I was going to go with my headline to be no headline at all. I was actually tempted just to submit nothing this week. I've got good reasons for it, but that was my initial thought. I then went with blah, 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 which I also thought was quite good. But instead I've gone for insert cliche here.
You've gone very meta.
Yeah, and I've accompanied that with insert caption here next to where the war photographer's photo would go, and insert harrowing picture here. And I've done it really to a nod towards the final verse where the speaker of the poem is talking about his editor and is talking about the fact that it all feels very mechanical and it all feels very cliched and it all feels like any old photo almost can go in there, and we'll just have insert cliched headline here. Let's pretend to get all emotional about it, but it's only between the bath and pre-lunch beers. None of us are really that bothered about it at the end of the day, and it's all very false and very fake. Let's go with Mr. Ackroyd next, please.
Yeah, I've gone agonising confessions of a photo bomber.
Oh, I like that.
I've tried to use a pun. I've been trying to use a pun for the last 7 or 8 weeks, and I finally managed to think of one.
I'm so proud.
That was very good. Photo bomber. I like that.
The agonising, but I think it incorporates everything in the poem. The agony that he goes through, the agonies that the victims go through, the confessional element, the religious element. the photo bombing element in terms of he's witnessing this. Really, should he be there? He's witnessing their private last moments, and the bombing element as well of those explosions that he has to put up with. So I think it just incorporates everything, and I've tried to get a pun in there, and I've finally managed to do it.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I like that one. Miss Ray, tough act to follow, that one.
Yeah, I've got nothing, I won't lie. I've gone for never forget, because I think it kind of encapsulates the kind of two meanings of memory and the power of memories that go through the poem. It's about the photographer and the fact that he's never going to be able to forget. But it's almost like a bit like a plea from the photographer to the people that are looking at these photos, the people that are engaging with photos, to never forget the things that are going on in the other countries.
Brilliant. Okay, DJ Zoom with the scores.
Okay, so start off with Miss Ray's Never Forget. Yeah, nice and short again. Good. Definitely gets all the right ideas. 4 points. Next is Mr. Firkins with 5 points. Insert cliche here. I love that idea. The idea that is, you can place anything you want into there and nobody really cares. It's definitely something that runs throughout the poem. That's important. But for Mr. Ackroyd, well done for the use of the pun. Actually, quite good this week. And
thank you.
Also slightly patronising.
That's been a lot of hard work to think of that. So yeah, I'll give you the 5 points.
Thanks, Mr. DJ Zoom.
Did you feel a little pat on your head there as well at the same time?
Not patronising at all.
No. A few weeks on the trot that he's been surprised that you've made him laugh as well. What is the most important quote and why? So then, Mr. Ackroyd, what is the most important quote and why?
Yeah, I've gone for solution slop in trays. It's a double entendre, so lots of phrases have literal and metaphorical meaning. So literally, it's the solutions of the negatives in the trays, the chemical solutions waiting for the photos to develop. But it's got extra layers of meaning as well. So the sibilance of the solution slopping, I think, adds a malevolent tone to this quote a little bit. And that onomatopoeic sound of slop as well, that verb mimics the sound of the camera clicking potentially, or the sound of bodies dropping unceremoniously to the ground. Furthermore, those bodies that slop to the ground, it makes me think of slopping in the mud and the dirt, which adds a kind of how war is disgusting as well, trying to follow on that analysis. But I think, again, students miss this bit. There's another bit in this quote, which I think is really good, and that's the solutions bit. Literally the chemical solutions making the photo develop, but figuratively, thinking about war. We don't have solutions to war. It's never ending. We haven't stopped. Ever since we've crawled out from under our rock, we've been killing each other. And for all our pretensions of being an evolved species with great minds, we can't find solutions to war. We just keep on doing it. And the references to other places in the first stanza of the poem, this was written in the 80s. So 30 years later, after this poem's it's been written, I can give you more. Bosnia, Iraq, Afghanistan, Rwanda, Somalia, Syria. The list goes on. And what that suggests to me is these solutions of humankind are still in our in-tray. We haven't solved these problems. War continues in a never-ending cycle.
Nice link into the modern day as well. Well done, sir. You did very strong performance from Mr. Ackroyd today.
I don't know why the intonation's going up with surprise.
I do.
Oh,
it's just been an unusual week. You didn't practice your live lesson with your partner. You didn't send us the PowerPoint in advance. There were transitions and noises and all sorts going on during the PowerPoint.
Go full maverick.
Experimental.
Unbelievable analysis about this poem so far as well.
I think this is the dubious third experimental album phase of Mr. Ackroyd.
Yeah. Gone from the solid, dependable to the
not necessarily popular with everyone,
to the more avant-garde.
You won't sell as many. But you might be appreciated.
Just normally,
I'm becoming my musical idol, Tom Waits.
Some of the idea that normally the group normally know quite a few days in advance what Mr. Ackroyd's thinking, whereas this has all come as a complete surprise. We weren't forewarned about any of this. Very good, Mr. Ackroyd. Okay, well, annoying that you went first and that me and Miss Ray both have to follow you, to be honest, but I'll go second. I've gone with the quote, spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. I think this is probably the best quote in the poem, which is why I chose it. Can I analyse it as well as Mr. Ackroyd analysed his? But we'll find out. Like Mr. Ackroyd, there is sibilance in here, spools of suffering set. I was trying to work out about sibilance because obviously there's so many reasons why a poet might use it. I was trying to think, is it to try to mimic a sound? Is it to try to mimic maybe the sobbing, the suffering, that sort of noise that people might make when they're crying? I'm not sure it does though, really. I'm not sure that's what she's aiming for. Duffy, I think it actually sounds quite soft, doesn't it? Spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. It's soothing and comforting. Now, why does she want that? Does it hint at a desensitivity here? Obviously, we've been talking about the graphic nature of the photos and yet the way that they're actually viewed and interpreted by people, and the fact that, like Mr. Ackroyd pointed out, we see them so often actually, and they never seem to go away. Is that because we've all become desensitized to them? But then I also looked at the ordered rows, and again, initially I'm thinking, is this a military strategy? Is this organisation like you would with an army? But then actually the red room is very much described like a church. So I'm thinking like a religious devotion towards his work of some kind, almost like it becomes a sanctuary away from the reality of what it's like to be out on holiday, the term the army used for being out on war. So it's actually a brilliant quote, and what I quite like about it is I think there's many different ways that you can unpack it. And the great thing about English is that there are no right or wrong answers. Miss Ray, you're up next.
So I've gone for all flesh is grass, and I've chosen that mainly for the juxtaposition between the flesh and the grass, because when you first look at it, it doesn't necessarily seem to be a juxtaposition, because flesh is kind of like a living material. It's what we have because we're alive. And then the grass is obviously green and luscious and signifies new life. But then when you look slightly deeper into the connotations of the word flesh, it has connotations of not being human anymore. It has connotations of almost being a dead body or parts of a dead body. So I think Duffy's trying to tell us about how dehumanizing war is, and how it does transform you from something that's living and vibrant into something that is dead on many levels. But also it does have that almost religious imagery, and we keep coming back to this. And I know, Mr. Ackroyd, you mentioned in your live lesson that she was a Catholic when she was younger. It's the idea of this cycle of life that keeps going, that when people die, their flesh will return to the ground. But I can't quite balance that piece of analysis with the rest of the tone of the poem, because it's almost like in that piece of analysis, Duffy is saying that people have to die to allow life to continue. You have to die to allow the grass and things to grow again. But that tone doesn't seem to be supported anywhere in her poem. She doesn't seem to be suggesting that people in this way have to die. So I find this quite really interesting, because it does stick out for me in that way. In fact, it has that juxtaposition, but I'm still not quite sure where my reading of that is and how it fits in with the rest of the poem.
Good, Miss Ray. Thank you very much, especially considering you only just started thinking about that quote. DJ Zoom.
I refute the accusation.
Okay, so Miss Ray, for you first. It's a very confusing quote actually, but very nice idea that you bring in all the religious stuff and the dehumanization of it. Definitely one of the more standout quotes within the poem. So for you, 4 points. And then next is Mr. Firkin's Spools of Suffering. I think if you linked it back to your headline, I would have given you the full marks of 5 points for it. The idea of the rows on rows, the kind of he's ordering kind of death, and whether it's like insert caption here, something along those lines, I think would have been nice. So 4 points. And definitely Mr. Ackroyd's idea and analysis. Yeah, very nice analysis. Lots of layers of meaning and the idea of solutions, and there is no solutions. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? That he's trying to find a solution to it, but he doesn't find one. And coupled with the sibilance and everything, just makes quite a cruel kind of image. So for you, 5 points.
Okay. I like the way that DJ Zoom says this is what you could have done. If you did this, you could have done this. You can take the classroom out of the teacher, but you can't take the teacher out of the classroom. Structure.
Okay, well, this is the part of the show where we have a little bit of a talk about structure. It's something which we think is very important, and this poem has got a very clear structure. 6 lines in every single verse, presumably to replicate that idea of the ordered rows, which I just discussed in my particular quote that I picked, the idea that the photographer is placing everything out in perfect order. This is his domain. This is the place that he wants to be in control of. Guys, is there anything you want to add about the structure of this poem?
Yeah, well, just moving on from what you said, I think I might have mentioned it in the live lesson. I can't actually remember, but that ordering of his actual job. But I think that's also trying to make sense of it, trying to create order out of chaos, the madness at the heart of war. He's trying to create order out of it. But I think it does have a regular, like the 6-line, the sestets, the 4 stanzas. The rhyme scheme is regular as well, isn't it? I think A, double B, C, double D. But the meter isn't regular. And I think that I find interesting. I don't want to just keep talking, so I'll come back to that if Miss Ray doesn't mention that. I want to leave some things for Miss Ray to talk about.
Thank you. No, it wasn't actually. It's your comment about the photographer, they're organising his thoughts and organising his ideas. And I want to link that to the end of the poem and you talked about it really eloquently in your lesson, when you said actually the reason why an editor will choose specific pictures is because their aim is to sell newspapers. And actually it makes me think about how much control over that the war photographer has. So when he's there trying to do his organisation, which is then shown how important that is through the structure of the poem, that organisation, how much of his own narrative is he putting into those stories? How much does that narrative no longer belong to the people that he's photographing, and how much actually comes from him and the story that he wants to create, knowing that he has to sell these pictures to a newspaper? I don't know. It's difficult because obviously structure is so important in this poem, and the idea of order is so important. I'm not necessarily sure that it's always a positive thing, the order. The photographer's putting the order on things.
No, good point. And I think that there is chaos within the order. There's a fair bit of caesura in the poem. I mean, line 9 I'm looking at now, for example, 2 full stops, and then it's followed immediately by enjambment. So it's actually very stop and start, that particular verse. There's quite a few lines like it.
Yeah.
And that shows that amidst what he likes us to think is a nice organised place, there's a hell of a lot of chaos.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and back to that meter as well. There's the line lengths are all different. The syllables in the meter in the actual lines. Some of it's iambic pentameter, but some of it's not. So it's that unsettling. The actual order's there, like the order he's placed his photographs, but under the surface, if you dig deeper, it's unsettled like his mind. Yeah. And we become unsettled reading it. We start asking ourselves questions, and our kind of minds and analysis are full of contradictions as well. So I think the structure of this poem does support the deeper layers of meaning behind the poem very well.
I agree.
Fantastic. What you fools don't know. All right, and guys, let's move on to our final segment of the show. What you two fools don't know. Miss Ray, what do we two fools not know?
Well, I wouldn't be so bold as to suggest that you don't know this, but I just want to draw your attention to Duffy's use of parallelism. Now, parallel sentences are sentences that begin with the same word or the same clause to indicate some sort of relationship between the two sentences. And I've seen that she's able to do this twice in the poem. She writes a sentence that begins with 2 ordinary pair and then 2 fields. And then she writes a second pair, which is so he sought, and then how he sought, and then how the blood. I apologise. And actually, it's that use of parallelism that really intrigues me, because I started then thinking about, why does she want those lines brought together? Because it emphasises the gap between those parallel clauses. So we get the ordinary rural life of England compared to the horrific things that he's seen there. And we get that juxtaposition. So it isolates them and it emphasises the contrast between them. But it also, by writing them in parallel sentences, it also unites them. It makes it seem like Duffy is telling us that you cannot have one without the other. And that is Duffy telling us that no matter how safe that photographer feels in his nice Middle England house, in his nice dark room where he's safe and protected, that idea is still so joined with the violence that he's seen when he's been taking those photographs, that he's never going to be able to escape those photographs and those things that he's seen.
Nice, thank you very much.
Yeah,
okay, well,
good.
what you two fools don't know. is I'm going to try and think about this poem in relation to the cluster that it's in, power and conflict. I think that it's obviously in the conflict cluster because it's photos of war, so that's fairly obvious why it's in there. But I think AQA are a hell of a lot smarter than that. This poem is in the power and conflict cluster because actually it links to so many of the other poems. I'm going to have a little talk about some other poems. So I was trying to think about remains in this poem. I know that obviously we've done them back to back for reasons. And one of the similarities in both poems is the use of alcohol, which has been used to wash away sins, depression, emotions. You had the soldier in Remains trying to flush away the drink and the drugs, so flush away his memories. And in this, we've got the pre-lunch beers. And we've also got so much inner conflict and turmoil going on. We've got hints of PTSD in this poem as well, I felt, when I was reading it.
Definitely.
This idea that this photographer is suffering from depression himself, where he stares impassively at the end, showing how powerless he is to get people, anybody around him, whether it be his peers, his colleagues, the general public, anybody, to feel genuine emotion. It feels like this poem is a complete exercise in futility. It's this inner struggle with him to try to see any worth in what he's doing almost by the end. At the start, he was so full of self-worth and importance. He's got a job to do, but not by the end of the poem. By the end of the poem, it almost feels like Wilfred Owen's exposure, a real lack of anything, direction, an emptiness. And I think that's why it fits so brilliantly in this particular cluster. Mr. Ackroyd, what you two fools don't know?
Oh, I've got my notes are all over the place, so I'm just going to try and put them together.
Lack of preparation there, Mr. Ackroyd.
Well, there's notes everywhere. But I was, because I was brought up a Catholic, so I'm interested in the religious imagery. And I know Duffy was brought up a Catholic as well. And this poem is sprinkled liberally with specifically Catholic religious imagery and ideas on morality, sin, transubstantiation, guilt. He's likened to a priest, which was discussed in the first stanza, and his devotion to the profession and the ritualistic, methodical way he carries out his job is like a priest intoning a mass. Suggests that he's going through a process himself as transubstantiation, which is turning, which for those that don't know, is turning the bread and wine into the body and the blood of Christ. He is in fact giving embodiment to the photographs in the same way, turning that into something of substance and whole. But what interests me about that last line is that all flesh is grass, which Miss Ray spoke about. For me, the reason this is in here is because it is delivered at funerals specifically. Okay, so what he's doing, once he's intoned his mass, he's giving those people that he's given substance to, he's actually giving them a funeral in maybe in his mind, giving them a shred of dignity in the photographer's eyes. However, what I find interesting in this is we move through the poem, he moves from priest to sinner himself. So the second stanza, he's reminded that the photographs trigger the memories in him, and specifically the guilt as he watches a wife looking at the moments of her husband's last breath on earth, and he takes the photograph anyway. He doesn't ask permission, he takes the photograph. That's got to play on your mind. He didn't sue, he didn't get approval. And the last line of that stanza says how blood stained into foreign dust, which is in the Bible, which is God saying, from dust you came, from dust you will return, to Adam, almost as a warning that man has fallen. So he goes from priest to the fall of man, up until the last stanza, where we get the congregation in as well, of the people back at home, Sunday supplements, a religious day, and they're washing their sins away with beer and with baths. And at the end, he's left questioning his morality, like any good Catholic would. Am I a good man? Am what I'm doing, does it make sense? And he stares apathetically out of the window. To me, it suggests that he thinks maybe what he does isn't worthwhile in the end. And then we're back to the cycle again. And I think he's back to being a priest because in a sense, he's atoning for his own guilt in a morally ambiguous world.
DJ Zoom with the scores.
Always surprises me, this section, and the stuff we come up with is just so good to listen to. So first with 9 points, Mr. Firkins, and that sort of links between the alcohol, actually, between the different poems and how people are using it to kind of a way to wash away their sins. So definitely something we should always consider. It's just a great poem that links to everything. So for you, 9 points. and then both with 10 points because they're both so good, so well explained. The Ackroyd's, the idea, the whole thing is a religious kind of journey, isn't it? In the sense of how a man he wants to do good, he sins. It's like this, the life of man, isn't it? The story of humanity.
Yeah.
So for you, 10 points, and then the kind of like the small nuance thing by Miss Ray, the kind of parallel clauses and stuff, and something I've never noticed before, how they kind of juxtapose each other. Well, they're kind of linked as well, aren't they? And again, definitely something that you should always try and look out for. That little structural idea is subtle, but also worth 10 points.
Okay, so how does that leave our leaderboard, DJ Zoom?
Okay, so in joint second place, both with 18 points, an excellent round for both of you this week is Mr. Firkins and Miss Ray, and the first time for full marks for Mr. Ackroyd with 20 points.
There we go, the holy grail, sir. Full marks.
We're not going to the end of this, are we?
We've all achieved full marks.
I know, it's almost like DJ Zoom is being really diplomatic and spreading it around.
Yeah, two of us deserve those full marks.
Oh, let it go.
What's it like, Mr. Ackroyd, knowing that you got the same mark for what you dished up today compared to what I dished up a few weeks ago?
Are you admitting? You're admitting your guilt. You're implicit in this terrible scoring of several weeks ago.
Whoa.
But I'm not bitter, so I'm going to let that go. Yeah, I don't want to harp on a point, as you know.
Well, if you're going to insist that you're not bitter about it, then I think we are going to have to start sharing screenshots of the WhatsApp messages you sent to Ackroyd to let the audience decide for themselves.
To be fair, I think Mr. Ackroyd did deserve full marks this week. I can tell you've been studying
really
up, and I think your religious knowledge. You say it comes from your background, but I dare say you've done some research this week in some of those things as well. I think that students would do very well to take on board those particular aspects. And Caroline Duffy absolutely was brought up a Catholic, and you can clearly see that she's made religious comments and references throughout the poem. So they're definitely there for a reason, and Mr. Ackroyd's pointed them out very, very well indeed. And if you can take away half of what he said, you're set to do very well in the exam. Well done, sir. That was good.
Thank you.
Okay then, guys. So which poem have we got next? I can't remember.
Charge of the Light Brigade.
Oh,
Charge of the Light Brigade.
There we go. A classic, a British classic. Okay then, guys. Well, we look forward to that next week. So from the Maverick, from the brains, from the DJ, from Mr. Firkins. Bye, all.
Bye.
Bye.